Good morning, traders. It's Wednesday, January 30th. Taking a look at the charts, we've got the trend analysis here on the 30-minute SP 500, and the market has been chopping around with. We've had some short-term oversold levels in the markets where it's popped up, hit some short-term targets in the market, rolled back over, got oversold, and we've got an upward bias more or less set for the market today. We're looking like it could push higher for the session. Yesterday, the market did gap higher, ended up hitting some selling pressure, and really took a hit from the technology stocks. They got hit real hard, muting the rest of the market. A lot of sectors were up, but the tech sector really put the downward pressure on the overall market. But shows that we should have an upward bias set for today. And if we take a look at the daily chart, you can see these two different levels of trendline resistance. The lower one here is based on a closing price highs, which is the closest resistance level on the chart, and the upper one is based on candle wick highs. So there's some room for it to still pop. This is what I've been talking about for a while, that we're still bullish on the overall equities market short term. I do feel like we could see a pop and a push up through or into these levels, but it could be short-lived and then roll over, and we could see more of a pause or correction before potentially trying to run a little bit higher and get up into this 28, pierce the 28 level, maybe just pierce these highs by a little bit here. And at that point, we could start to see the market roll over more in a big way. But right now, we are getting close to resistance. All we're looking for is a quick pop and push into this resistance level, which should push our Roku position into the money. It's been holding up really well while the equities market's been selling off. Yesterday, let's just continue with the SP 500 for a minute. Let's just look at our short-term trend analysis. Overall, the trend has gone from red bars to orange neutral, and we are still in an uptrend. We're holding above some key moving averages, and more or less we've got some spikes that have taken place and filled. A spike this morning formed out. You can see we got a hash here, some of these short-term targets. Price is already starting to fade back down to hit two of those. We are set to see the market more or less gap higher. Market closed right here, and at this point the market has got this gap. So you can see how the lower end of the spike goes all the way down to fill a good chunk of this gap. So overall, expecting probably a little bit of a pullback with today's gap higher. The market is gapping all around. We're seeing it a couple days ago, it gapped higher and then it gapped lower. You can see, actually, if I just move this over here, this is a good sign that we are into more or less resistance when you start to see gaps all over the place where the market gaps higher. Actually, it's hard to see here, but there was a pretty big gap, or sorry, it wasn't too big of a gap. Gap lower, another gap lower, a big gap to the upside, another gap, another gap. Once we get into all these gaps up near resistance, we know this is the bulls and bears fighting for direction, and it gives us a little uncertainty. So ideally, we just want to see a quick poke and a squeeze up, push it, breaking these highs here, and I think that could be followed by some strong selling. And if we look at our short-term cycle, you can see if we, over the next 1 to 2 days, we could get a squeeze up, test these highs or go beyond, and then we might see that bout of selling and start to break some of these pivot lows, come down to the 20-day and kind of flush out and see if it can hold at the 20-day. Let's just take a quick look over at our current positions. Here is Roku, or sorry, this is GDXJ. Very strong push to the upside. It's still actually showing a cycle to the upside today. It's relatively flat on the session, set to open a hair lower, but it's hard to tell with pre-market of GDXJ. It doesn't really trade pre-market as showing where it really will be. Overall, very strong pop to the upside. Starting to get a little bit overdone, and if we zoom out on the chart, we are going through some pretty significant, getting into the depth, the mid-range of this area, a little bit higher. This 32, 33 area will definitely be very much so the mid-range. If it can get up to that level, I think we'll see some pretty big selling step in it and kind of fizzle this move out. It has had a nice move, and it's getting a little long in the teeth here for some type of pullback and correction. Looking over at, let's take a quick look at gold. Gold continued to extend higher. Obviously, Our next major resistance level is 1375 area. It's been pushing up, but again, if we do see the equities market roll over here, we could continue to see the precious metals actually be seen as the safe haven. We could see them actually work themselves higher. So I think things are going to get choppy. It's going to be a choppy grind higher, very tough to trade. More or less, we got long into precious metals down into this area, so we've caught this run with the GDXJ, and we're just going to continue to let this kind of play out and mature a little bit. But overall, it is right under resistance, very significant resistance here, and I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see this chop around with some big swings up and to the downside. Looking over at the US dollar index, it's trading relatively flat today. It is still struggling to find support and to really extend from this level. More or less, we've got there's potential pivot highs. We're still making a series of higher lows. We're still making a series of higher highs in the market. So it is still channeling up. If we start to break this low here, we will start to be making lower lows. That could trigger a big run in commodities and precious metals. But at this point, it does have a little bull flag, and we could continue to see this push up, and it may even go all the way up on the US dollar index, could push up to the 99-100 level, which is up to some new highs, at which point it could be a huge reversal, and that could be the trigger of a major run in precious metals. So overall, we're seeing money continue to flow into precious metals, and I think we're seeing the dollar and precious metals seen as a safe haven for money. So even if the dollar does move up, we could see precious metals continue to hold their ground fairly well. Looking over at energies real quick, natural gas down about 1% today. Yesterday, starting to flush down, got down to this 280 level that we were talking about back over here. We wanted to see a push and a flush through this 280 or 270 level. Continues to fizzle out. We got a big spike of some selling volume. If you look at the chart of natural gas here, we got lots of gaps on the chart. It is all over the place. We got a gap and a gap, huge gap back here, another gap, lots of gaps, and big gap here, and we still have a pretty decent gap yesterday. This morning we are set to see it gap a little bit lower as well. So it is kind of all over the place. The big gaps and these big moves mean that it's still struggling for a direction. Overall, I think we need to see some big lower sell-off on the daily chart, something much larger that really flushes price out. If we zoom out on the chart a little bit, we've got some pretty significant support levels through here. We've got one, the major one will be there. There's another one right underneath it that was acted as two levels. So more or less, I'd like to see it almost pierce and flush through these with a sharp type of reversal bar potentially, and it could be an oversold knee-jerk reaction rally to the upside. Overall, we're going to start to have this kind of like a falling trend line, a very steep one here based off these highs that it could flush out, chop around, and when it starts to potentially break that, it could be the signs of a knee-jerk reaction to the upside going forward. Looking at crude oil, up 1%. Yesterday had a nice pop and a rally. If we look at our short-term trend, it was oversold yesterday, popped all the way up into resistance. It went from an oversold to an overbought level, hitting a target, just a technical intraday short-term momentum target. Overall, the bias for today is pointing to the downside for crude. It is trading up in pre-market. It's at resistance. We'll see if selling steps back in. Each time it's hit this level, we have seen 3 bouts of selling as it pushes up. The last 2 times it hit here, pretty big sell-off right after that. If it can break through these, then we're going to be off to the races up into this this low 60 zone. We'll see if it can hold up. It's got some strength this morning. We'll see where it closes at the end of the day. Again, it still has these blue highs right across here. So it does have a little bit of work to do to break through and hold above that. The big question is, does it pop and break through it and then reverse back down and sell off in a big way? Anyways, that's it for this morning. Actually, let me pull up Roku real quick here. We are long Roku. Yesterday had a nice pop. It was up about 5% yesterday at one point. Pulled back when all the tech stocks really pulled the whole market back. Everything kind of got sucked back down. It was a pretty big volume day. It started to break out and sellers stepped back in. It is significant resistance with this level right across here. It's a pretty significant pivot high, and that's more or less what it tagged, and sellers stepped in, which fell in line with the overall broad market selling off as well, which is why we got a pretty good pullback at the same time. But overall, continues to still have strong momentum. It's got lots of volume moving into it. It's a high momentum play. All we need is the SP 500 to rally, and this thing should continue to rally and outperform. And we got about a 51 on our upside target, which is pretty much the bottom of this gap window, this opening price over here. Anyways, that's it for now. Talk to you in a bit. Bye-bye.